The crack of a gunshot echoed through the foothills as Nora Patterson clutched her side and stumbled forward, her ragged breathing creating small clouds in the crisp autumn air of 1876 Colorado. She had been running for what felt like hours, the memory of her father's wagon train ambush still fresh in her mind as she pushed through the pain and exhaustion. Night was falling fast, and with it came the bone-chilling cold of the Rocky Mountain wilderness. Nora's thin calico dress offered little protection against the elements. At 19, she'd never imagined she'd be alone in such desolate territory, the only survivor of what was supposed to be a fresh start for her family after her mother's passing. The outlaws had taken everything: the wagon, their supplies, their horses, and left the others for dead. Only her quick thinking and knowledge of the land had allowed her to escape into the wilderness. Her stomach cramped painfully, a harsh reminder that she hadn't eaten in 2 days. The last of her meager rations, a handful of dried berries she'd managed to grab during her escape, were long gone. As darkness descended completely, Nora spotted a faint orange glow in the distance. A campfire. Hope and fear battled within her. The fire could mean salvation or further danger. With no other options and the temperature dropping rapidly, Nora made her decision and moved cautiously toward the light. Drawing closer, she could make out a small camp nestled against a rock outcropping. A single figure sat beside the fire, and the silhouette of a horse was visible nearby. Nora hesitated at the edge of the firelight, her legs trembling from exhaustion. A twig snapped beneath her foot, and the figure by the fire turned suddenly, hand moving to the holster at his side. "Who's there?" a deep voice called out, steady and alert. "Show yourself." Nora stepped forward, her hands raised slightly. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking from thirst, "I mean no harm." The man rose to his full height, and in the flickering firelight, Nora could see he was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in the practical garb of a cattle driver: worn denim, leather chaps, and a dusty hat pulled low over his eyes. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with several days' worth of stubble darkening his jaw. "Miss." His voice softened as he took in her bedraggled appearance. "You're hurt." Nora glanced down at the tear in her dress where a bullet had grazed her earlier that day. "It's nothing," she managed before her knees finally gave way. The man moved with surprising speed, catching her before she hit the ground. "Easy there," he said, guiding her to a spot by the fire. "What's your name?" "Nora," she replied weakly. "Nora Patterson." "I'm Adam Harrington," he said, reaching for his canteen. "Drink slowly now." Nora took the canteen with shaking hands and sipped the cool water gratefully. As the life-giving liquid trickled down her parched throat, she watched Adam move to his saddlebags. He returned moments later with a chunk of bread and some jerky. "It's not much," he said, offering her the food, "but it'll hold you until morning." Tears welled in Nora's eyes as she accepted his offering. "Thank you," she whispered, taking a small bite of the bread. It was simple trail fare, but in that moment, it tasted better than any feast she'd ever had. Adam watched her eat for a moment before turning to tend the fire. "What happened to you, Miss Patterson? Not many women travel these parts alone." Between bites of food, Nora recounted the ambush that had left her family and the other travelers dead. She described how she'd hidden in the underbrush until the outlaws had ridden away, and how she'd been running ever since, afraid they might return to finish what they'd started. Adam's expression darkened as he listened. "Bastards," he muttered. "Sounds like the Blackwell gang. They've been terrorizing the area for months now." "You know them?" Nora asked, her voice small. "Know of them," Adam clarified. "I'm driving cattle to Denver, been hearing stories at every stop." He paused, studying her face in the firelight. "Where were you headed?" "Silver Creek," Nora replied. "My uncle has a homestead there. After my mother died last winter, Father thought we should join him." Adam nodded thoughtfully. "Silver Creek's about 3 days' ride from here." He hesitated, then added, "I'm not heading that way, but I can take you to Fort Collins. There's a settlement there, maybe someone heading to Silver Creek who could take you the rest of the way." Relief washed over Nora. "I would be most grateful, Mr. Harrington." "Adam," he corrected with a slight smile, "out here formalities don't mean much." For the first time in days, Nora felt a flicker of hope. "Thank you, Adam," he nodded, then moved to retrieve a bedroll from his pack. "You should rest. That scratch on your side needs cleaning, but we'll see to it in the morning when there's better light." As Adam spread the bedroll near the fire for her, Nora felt a strange mix of gratitude and wariness. Her father had always warned her about the dangers of trusting strangers, especially in the untamed territories. But something in Adam's steady gaze and gentle manner put her at ease. "What about you?" she asked, noticing he had given her his only bedroll. "I'll keep watch," he replied simply. "Used to sleeping rough?" Nora hesitated, then settled onto the bedroll, the warmth of the fire and the first real food in days making her eyelids heavy. As she drifted towards sleep, she heard Adam add another log to the fire and the soft sounds of him checking his rifle. She awoke to the smell of coffee and the soft glow of dawn spreading across the eastern sky. Adam was already up, tending to a small pot over the rekindled fire. His horse, a sturdy bay gelding, was saddled and ready nearby. "Morning," Adam said, noticing her stirring. "Coffee's almost ready." Nora sat up, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles and the dull pain in her side. "Thank you." Adam poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. "Let me take a look at that wound before we head out." Nora hesitated, feeling a flush of embarrassment. "It's really not bad." "Wounds can turn bad quick out here," Adam countered firmly. "Infection's no small matter when you're days from a doctor." Recognizing the wisdom in his words, Nora nodded. She turned slightly and lifted the torn edge of her dress just enough to reveal the angry red graze along her ribs. Adam's face remained impassive as he examined the wound. "Bullet just grazed you. You're lucky." He reached for his saddlebags and produced a small tin. "This'll sting, but it'll keep infection away." The salve did indeed sting fiercely, and Nora bit her lip to keep from crying out. Adam worked quickly but gently, his calloused fingers surprisingly delicate as he applied a clean strip of cloth as a bandage. "Thank you," she said again, adjusting her dress once he'd finished. Adam nodded, then handed her a plate with some hardtack and the last of his jerky. "Eat up. We've got a long ride ahead." After their sparse breakfast, Adam helped Nora onto his horse before mounting behind her. The closeness was awkward at first, and Nora sat stiffly, acutely aware of his chest against her back and his arms on either side of her as he held the reins. "Relax," he said, his voice low near her ear. "Dancer's steady, but it'll be a rough ride if you're tense." Gradually, as they began their journey across the rugged terrain, Nora found herself settling into the rhythm of the horse's gait and the solid presence of Adam behind her. They rode in companionable silence for much of the morning, the vast landscape of the Colorado Territory stretching before them. Around midday, they stopped by a small stream to rest the horse and eat a few handfuls of the wild berries Adam spotted growing nearby. "Have you always been a cattle driver?" Nora asked as they sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree. Adam shook his head. "No, madam, fought in the war when I was just a boy. After that, tried my hand at a few things, ranching mostly, some mining." He paused, his gaze drifting to the distant mountains. "This job's temporary. I'm saving to buy my own spread someday." "That sounds wonderful," Nora said, surprising herself with how easily she could picture it, a small ranch house, cattle grazing on rolling pastures. "What about you?" Adam asked. "What awaits you in Silver Creek besides your uncle?" Nora plucked a blade of grass, twirling it between her fingers. "I'm not entirely sure. Before Mother died, I was teaching at the schoolhouse back in Missouri. I suppose I hope to find similar work out west." "You're a teacher." Adam looked impressed. "Was," Nora corrected. "Though I do miss it. Children have such curious minds." Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Adam was on his feet in an instant, hand on his revolver as he scanned the horizon. "Get behind me," he said quietly, all traces of the relaxed cowboy gone, replaced by the alert vigilance of a man who'd seen combat. Nora obeyed, heart pounding as 3 riders appeared in the distance, approaching their position. As the riders drew closer, Adam's posture relaxed slightly. U.S. Cavalry, he murmured. Still, stay close. The soldiers reined in a respectful distance away, and their leader, a young lieutenant, tipped his hat. Afternoon, sir, madam, Lieutenant Parker, 7th Cavalry. Mind if we water our horses? Adam nodded. Help yourselves. As the soldiers dismounted and led their horses to the stream, the lieutenant approached them. You folks should know there's been trouble in these parts. Stagecoach robbery yesterday about 10 miles east of here. Nora felt Adam tense beside her. Any descriptions of the robbers? He asked. 4 men, the lieutenant replied. Leaders said to be a tall man with a scar running down his face. Name's Blackwell, mean son of a. He glanced at Nora and cleared his throat. Pardon, madam, mean character. Adam nodded grimly. The lady here had a run-in with them 2 days back. They attacked her wagon train. The lieutenant's eyes widened as he turned to Nora. You survived an encounter with the Blackwell gang, madam. That's remarkable. Nora shuddered at the memory. They didn't see me. I hid. Smart move, the lieutenant said. We're tracking them now. Heading north, we think. We're bound for Fort Collins, Adam said. Any trouble that way should be clear, the lieutenant assured him. But I'd move quick if I were you. Those men are unpredictable. After the soldiers departed, Adam and Nora resumed their journey, pushing harder than before. The terrain became more challenging as they entered the foothills, and Adam guided his horse expertly through narrow passes and over rocky ground. By nightfall, they had covered significant ground but were still at least a day's ride from Fort Collins. Adam found them a sheltered spot to make camp, beneath an overhang that would hide their fire from prying eyes. As they sat beside the small flame, eating the rabbits Adam had managed to snare, Nora studied her companion's face in the flickering light. There was a gentleness there that belied his rugged exterior, a kindness in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. Why are you helping me? She asked suddenly. You could have left me at the nearest settlement or even sent me with those soldiers. Adam was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. My sister, he finally said, his voice low. She was about your age when she tried to make the journey west. Wagon train got separated in a storm. She didn't make it. He looked up, meeting Nora's gaze. I guess I'm helping the person I wish someone had helped back then. The simple honesty of his answer touched Nora deeply. Without thinking, she reached across and placed her hand on his. I'm sorry about your sister and grateful for your kindness. Adam's hand turned beneath hers, his fingers closing gently around her own. For a heartbeat, they stayed that way, connected by more than just the touch of skin on skin. Then, as if suddenly aware of the impropriety, they both pulled away. Adam cleared his throat and busied himself with adding wood to the fire, while Nora smoothed her skirts, trying to ignore the lingering warmth of his touch. That night, despite Adam's protests, Nora insisted they share the bedroll, sitting upright on opposite sides of the fire. Neither slept much, taking turns keeping watch and stealing glances at each other when they thought the other wasn't looking. The next morning dawned clear and cold. They set off early, the urgency of their journey heightened by the lieutenant's warnings about the Blackwell gang. The day passed in alternating periods of comfortable silence and easy conversation, as Nora found herself opening up to Adam about her life before the journey west, her childhood in Missouri, her brief teaching career, her mother's long illness. In turn, Adam shared stories of his time in the war, his years working on various ranches, and his dream of someday having a place of his own. As they talked, Nora found herself imagining what such a life might be like, and was surprised to find herself picturing a place in it. They were less than half a day's ride from Fort Collins when disaster struck. Dancer, Adam's trusty mount, stepped into a prairie dog hole and went down hard, throwing both riders. Adam managed to twist in the saddle, taking the brunt of the fall and cushioning Nora's landing with his own body. For a terrifying moment, Nora lay stunned, the wind knocked from her lungs. Then Adam groaned beneath her and she scrambled to her feet. "Adam, are you hurt?" He sat up slowly, wincing as he moved his right leg. "Nothing broken, I think, but my ankle's not right." Dancer had regained his feet and stood nearby, head hanging low, clearly favoring his front left leg. Adam examined the horse with a practiced eye and shook his head grimly. "He's lamed. Not badly, but he can't carry us both now." Nora looked around at the vast, empty landscape stretching in all directions. "What do we do?" Adam's face was grim as he tested his weight on his injured ankle, grimacing at the pain. "We walk. Fort Collins can't be more than 10 miles now." He nodded toward Dancer. "He can carry our supplies, maybe you for short stretches." "I'll walk," Nora said firmly. "You're injured." Adam gave her a look that was equal parts admiration and stubbornness. "We'll both walk. Save the horse for if one of us can't go on." They gathered their meager supplies and set off, leading Dancer by the reins. Adam limped noticeably but waved off Nora's concerns with a tight smile. Their progress was slow, the miles seeming to stretch endlessly before them. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon and a chill wind began to blow. Nora could see Adam struggling more with each step, though he tried to hide it. "We should rest," she suggested, pointing to a copse of trees ahead. "Just for a few minutes." Adam looked like he wanted to argue but finally nodded. "Just a short break," he agreed. They had barely reached the shelter of the trees when the first fat raindrops began to fall. Within minutes, the drizzle had turned into a downpour and they were forced to make camp despite the early hour. Using Adam's oilskin coat and some branches, Nora constructed a crude shelter while Adam, despite his injury, gathered what dry wood he could find. Soon they had a small fire going beneath their makeshift roof, though the wind occasionally drove rain onto them. "Some cowboy I turned out to be," Adam said with a rueful smile as they huddled close to the fire. "Can't even get a lady safely to town." "You saved my life," Nora reminded him. "I'd likely have died out there if you hadn't found me." "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for," Adam replied, his eyes holding hers. "I've known men who'd have broken under what you've endured." Something in his gaze made Nora's heart beat faster. She looked away, suddenly self-conscious. "We should try to dry these clothes before we catch our death." The practical task of arranging their sodden outer garments near the fire gave them both something to focus on besides the growing awareness between them. As night fell and the storm continued to rage, they sat side by side beneath their shelter, sharing Adam's remaining blanket for warmth. "Tell me more about your dream ranch," Nora said, trying to distract them both from their precarious situation. Adam's face softened. "Nothing fancy. Good water, decent grazing land, a small house to start, something I could add onto over time." He paused, then added quietly, "Room for a family someday, God willing." "It sounds wonderful," Nora said sincerely. "What about you?" Adam asked. "What dreams were you carrying west?" Nora considered the question. "Safety, I suppose. After Mother died, Father and I struggled. The farm wasn't doing well." She sighed. "I hoped for a fresh start, maybe my own classroom again." She hesitated, then added, "A home of my own someday, too." Their eyes met in the flickering firelight, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then Adam reached out slowly, his rough fingers gently tucking a strand of damp hair behind Nora's ear. The simple touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "Nora," he said, his voice low and uncertain. Before he could continue, a sound outside their shelter made them both freeze. The unmistakable noise of approaching horses. Adam's hand went to his gun, and he motioned for Nora to stay behind him as he peered out into the storm. Through the curtain of rain, they could make out 4 mounted figures approaching their campsite. "Riders coming in from the north," Adam whispered. "Could be nothing but—" "Or it could be them," Nora finished, her voice trembling slightly. Adam's face was grim. "Stay here, keep down and quiet." Despite her protests, Adam limped out into the rain, positioning himself between the approaching riders and their shelter. Nora watched in fear as he stood tall despite his injury, hand resting casually near his holster. The lead rider pulled up about 20 feet away, and even through the rain, Nora could see the jagged scar that ran down his face. Blackwell, the man who had killed her father and the others. "Evening, friend," Blackwell called out, his voice carrying over the storm. "Nasty night to be camping." "Just passing through," Adam replied evenly. "Heading to Fort Collins." Blackwell glanced at the makeshift shelter and the hobbled horse. "Looks like you've had some trouble." "Nothing I can't handle," Adam said. Blackwell's gaze sharpened. "You alone out here?" Nora held her breath, pressing herself deeper into the shadows of their shelter. "Just me and my thoughts," Adam answered, his stance relaxed but alert. One of Blackwell's men leaned forward in his saddle, peering toward the shelter. "Boss, I think there's someone else." He never finished his sentence. Adam drew with lightning speed, his first shot catching the observant outlaw in the chest. As the man toppled from his horse, all hell broke loose. Blackwell and his remaining men opened fire as Adam dove for cover behind a nearby tree. The sound of gunshots mingled with the crash of thunder as the storm intensified around them. Nora, heart pounding, looked frantically around the shelter for anything she could use as a weapon. Her gaze fell on Adam's rifle, propped against their packs. She grabbed it, checking quickly to ensure it was loaded as her father had taught her years ago. Outside, the gunfight continued. Adam was outnumbered and pinned down, and Nora could see he was favoring his injured ankle heavily as he returned fire from behind the tree. Taking a deep breath, Nora crawled to the edge of the shelter, the rifle clutched in her trembling hands. Through the rain, she could make out one of Blackwell's men trying to circle around behind Adam's position. Without allowing herself time to reconsider, Nora raised the rifle, sighted along the barrel as her father had shown her during hunting trips, and squeezed the trigger. The recoil slammed into her shoulder, but her aim was true. The outlaw jerked and fell, clutching his leg. The unexpected shot from a new direction caused momentary confusion among the attackers. Adam seized the opportunity to fire again, his bullet finding its mark in another of Blackwell's men. Now it was 2 against 2, Adam and Nora versus Blackwell and his remaining henchmen. The odds had improved, but they were still in grave danger. "Nora, stay down," Adam shouted as he spotted her with the rifle, but it was too late. Blackwell had seen her too. With a snarl of recognition, he wheeled his horse toward the shelter. "You're that girl from the wagon train," he called out. "Should have made sure you were dead with the rest of them." He raised his pistol toward her, but before he could fire, Adam lunged from his cover, tackling Blackwell from his horse. The 2 men crashed to the ground, grappling in the mud as the rain poured down around them. The remaining outlaw turned his attention to this new threat, raising his gun toward the struggling figures. Nora didn't hesitate. She fired again, and the man cried out as her bullet grazed his shoulder. It wasn't a killing shot, but it was enough to send him fleeing into the stormy night. Meanwhile, Adam and Blackwell fought furiously on the ground, each man seeking the advantage. Despite his injured ankle, Adam fought with the determination of a man protecting something precious. He landed a solid blow to Blackwell's jaw, momentarily stunning the outlaw. In that instant, Adam drew his knife, pressing it against Blackwell's throat. "It's over," he growled. Blackwell, sensing defeat, went still beneath him. "You gonna kill me, cowboy?" Adam's face was hard as stone. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't." "Adam, no." Nora called, hurrying to his side despite the rain and mud. "He's not worth it." Adam glanced up at her, his expression torn. "He killed your father, Nora, all those people, and he'll hang for it," Nora said firmly, "but not by your hand, please." For a long moment, Adam remained poised with the knife at Blackwell's throat. Then, with a deep breath, he withdrew the blade slightly. "You're lucky she's a better person than either of us," he told the outlaw. Using strips torn from Blackwell's own shirt, they bound the outlaw securely. The wounded man Nora had shot in the leg was still alive but badly injured. They tied him as well and did what they could for his wound. As the storm finally began to abate, Adam turned to Nora, his face a mixture of admiration and concern. "That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen," he said. Coming out with that rifle, Nora managed a shaky smile. "Perhaps a bit of both." Adam stepped closer, his eyes searching her face. "You saved my life." "You saved mine first," she reminded him softly. For a moment, they stood there in the rain, the enormity of what they'd just survived washing over them. Then, with a gentleness that belied the violence of moments before, Adam cupped Nora's face in his hands and kissed her. It was a brief kiss, tender and questioning, and when he pulled away, his eyes were uncertain. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." Nora cut him off by rising on her tiptoes and returning his kiss, her hands clutching the wet fabric of his shirt. When they finally parted, they were both breathless. "We should get these men to Fort Collins," Adam said, his voice husky. "Yes," Nora agreed, though neither made any move to step away. The journey to Fort Collins the next day was slow but uneventful. They fashioned a travois for the wounded outlaw, while Blackwell was forced to walk, his hands bound and tethered to Dancer's saddle. Adam's ankle was painful but not seriously injured, and Nora insisted he ride for short stretches. They arrived at the settlement by mid-afternoon, causing quite a stir as they marched their prisoners down the main street to the sheriff's office. News of their capture of the notorious Blackwell spread quickly, and by evening they found themselves treated as heroes by the townsfolk. The local doctor tended to Adam's ankle and proclaimed it a mild sprain that would heal with rest. The sheriff, upon hearing their full story, insisted on putting them up at the town's small hotel at the county's expense, promising that the reward for Blackwell would be theirs once the paperwork was processed. That night, as they sat in the hotel's modest dining room, the reality of their imminent parting hung heavy between them. "The sheriff says there's a family heading to Silver Creek at the end of the week," Nora said, pushing her food around her plate. "They've offered to let me travel with them." Adam nodded, his expression unreadable. "That's good, you'll be with your uncle soon." "Yes," Nora agreed, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in her chest. They ate in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Adam set down his fork and looked directly at her. "Nora, I'm not a wealthy man. I have some savings and now this reward, but it's not much. The land I've been looking at is rough, untamed. The house would be small to start, the work hard." He paused, taking a deep breath. "But if you wanted, that is, if you'd consider." Nora's heart pounded as she realized what he was trying to say. "Are you asking me to come with you, Adam?" "I'm asking you to marry me," he said, the words rushing out now. "I know it's sudden and we've only known each other a few days, but I've never met anyone like you." "You're brave and kind and yes," Nora interrupted, tears of joy springing to her eyes. Adam blinked as if unsure he'd heard correctly. "Yes," Nora laughed, reaching across the table to take his hands in hers. "Yes, Adam Harrington, I will marry you." The smile that spread across Adam's face was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I'll work every day to be worthy of you," he promised, lifting her hands to his lips. "We'll work together," Nora corrected him gently, "side by side." They were married 3 days later in Fort Collins' small church, with half the town turning out to witness the union of the brave couple who had captured Blackwell. The sheriff gave the bride away, and the hotel owner's wife had helped Nora fashion a simple but elegant wedding dress from fabric, purchased with part of the reward money. After the ceremony, they set out for the land Adam had been saving for, a plot near the Wyoming border with good water and sheltered grazing land. It took them 2 weeks to reach it, traveling at a leisurely pace with supplies purchased from their reward money, and Dancer fully recovered from his injury. When they finally crested the rise that overlooked what would be their home, Adam drew their wagon to a halt. Below them stretched a verdant valley, bisected by a clear stream and sheltered on 3 sides by gentle hills. "What do you think?" Adam asked, suddenly nervous. "It's not much yet, but it's perfect," Nora said, squeezing his hand. "Absolutely perfect." They built their first home together that summer, a small but sturdy cabin positioned to catch the morning sun. Adam worked from dawn till dusk, and Nora labored alongside him, learning new skills and applying herself with the same determination that had helped her survive her ordeal in the wilderness. By autumn, they had a snug home, a small herd of cattle purchased with the last of their reward money, and the beginnings of what would someday be a prosperous ranch. As winter approached, they worked together to prepare for the harsh months ahead, storing food, chopping wood, and making their home as comfortable as possible. On the first truly cold night of the season, as snow began to fall outside, they sat together before their fireplace, Nora's head resting on Adam's shoulder. "You ever think about that first night?" she asked softly. "When I stumbled into your camp," Adam's arm tightened around her. "Every day," he admitted. "I thank God you found me. I was so hungry and afraid," Nora remembered. "And then there you were, sharing your bread and your name. And now I've shared my life," Adam said, turning to kiss her gently. "Our life," Nora corrected him, placing his hand over her stomach where their first child had just begun to grow. "Our beautiful, shared life." Adam's eyes widened as he understood her meaning, and then his face transformed with joy as he gathered her into his arms. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing their new home in pristine white. While inside, by the warmth of their fire, Nora and Adam held each other close, their love a beacon in the wilderness, as bright and enduring as the stars that had guided them home. 5 years later, their ranch, which they had named Firelight in memory of their first meeting, had flourished beyond their wildest dreams. The small cabin had been expanded into a comfortable home, their herd had grown considerably, and the sound of children's laughter filled the air as their son and daughter played in the yard. Nora had started a small school for the children of neighboring homesteaders, while Adam had earned a reputation as one of the most fair and hard-working ranchers in the territory. Together, they had built not just a home, but a community, opening their doors to travelers and newcomers alike. And each night, no matter how busy their days had been, they still found time to sit together beside their fire, remembering the hunger and the sharing that had brought them together and grateful for the love that continued to sustain them through all of life's challenges and joys.